Wild Harbor General Store, located in historic North Falmouth Village, providing quality goods and services for 170 years. Continuing to make history with our support of FCTV's coverage of Falmouth Town Meeting.
evening and welcome to the January 5th, 2015 meeting of the Board of Selectmen, and I invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, at our first meeting of the new year, it's nice to see all the department heads here and everyone else, obviously, who has a very keen interest in the topic of our discussion tonight, which is the budget, the upcoming budget for the next fiscal year. I would like to announce, as you may know, with the untimely passing of Kathy Norton, that we have a vacancy in as our representative to the Steamship Authority. Actually, the term ended December 31st of 2014 anyway, so it would have normally just activated a new application period. So we will be seeking applicants to fill this vacancy, and I think it will be posted, and we would like to have the applications in 3 weeks from this coming Friday, whatever that day is, close to the end of January. Is there anyone who would care to speak under public comment on any item not on the agenda? Yes, to the microphone. And
hello, my name is Allison Whalen. I'm a parent of a 6-year-old at North Falmouth, and I just wanted to say that my concern is that there's adequate funding for the schools going forward. I've been volunteering in the schools for 2 years now, and I've talked to a lot of parents. Today was the first day back at school, so I was hoping some other parents would make it here, but I've noticed last year to this year there seems to be a little more strain in some of the staff at the school, I'm just hoping that maybe funding for the teaching assistants that I saw in the classrooms last year might be appropriated for going forward, as well as some of the other programs that have been lost over the last few years. And not just for my child, but I know moving to this town, it was important. The school system was an important consideration, and I'm hoping that other families with young children will want to come and stay in Falmouth. Thank you for your time.
thank you. Is there anyone else who would care to speak under public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the minutes of the meeting of December 22nd, 2014, the public session.
I would move approval of the December 22nd minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion? No? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. So we'll move to the summary of actions. We just have a few short business items tonight before we get to the budget. The first is to authorize the town manager to execute a 30-day extension of the current lease by and between the Town of Falmouth and Billy Casper Golf LLC for the Falmouth Country Club upon the present terms and conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Becky?
I think that this is a very good idea so that we have more conversation about it. I think we knew that this was coming up on the lease, and I myself highly endorse that we continue with our golf course, and I'm glad we've got a few more days that people can bring their positions, and we can listen to that, and I definitely approve of this action.
Great, thank you, Sam.
Will there be an opportunity for a public hearing on this matter at all?
Well, good question. There's no provision for a public hearing necessary in this case, but it would be up to this board if you would prefer to, conduct things in that manner.
We do have to have a vote to renew the lease. Ultimately.
Absolutely, there will be a public vote
Yeah.
as part of a public meeting, but not a no formal hearing is required. of course. So we would be bringing recommendations to the board pursuant to your granting this extension. It will allow us to bring to some closure discussions that we have had underway, working with town council and others. And then you would be formally discussing and voting on that at a meeting within the next 30 days.
And that would be the entire contract that's being proposed. Okay.
Next.
Right. So, motion and a second. Any further
Madam Chair?
discussion? Yes.
I apologize.
Oh, Heather.
Heather might have one comment as well.
Well, I just wanted to note that there was a public hearing and forum back in August that led to the contents of the request for proposals that was approved by this board. So there was a hearing at that point.
Next.
Okay. So, on the motion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. And lastly is to approve the master subordination agreement for 20 Shore Street. This is something that we do periodically, and Heather, did you or Julian want to make a comment on this? I think it's pretty clear. We have a copy of it. We've been advised by legal counsel for the obviously for the developer, Michael Galasso, I think, just stepped in the room. Did you want to have any comments you wish to make, Michael?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Michael Galasso with TRI. No real comments, just that the project's been completed. It's fully leased, and subordination agreement is to allow us to pay off our construction loan and put a long-term permanent loan on the property.
Great.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a couple of quick comments. There are multiple lending agencies, including the town, involved in the project, and it really wasn't until the project was ready to close out and all agencies had their issues resolved that the subordination agreement could be presented in its final form to the board, and that's what's happening tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. It's a great project.
It's a fabulous project. I think most of us were there for the ribbon cutting.
Yes, and I do want to thank town staff, Heather, and the other folks who all worked on this project with us.
Right.
I think it's a great success for the town.
Very much so.
We need more like that.
Thank you.
I move approval of the master subordination agreement for 20 Shore Street.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. I'm going to just send these documents, 2 documents, subordination agreement down for signature, and you can pass them back when you're finished. So now I will turn the meeting over to the town manager for the presentation of the proposed F-16 budget and the capital facilities plan. Julian?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. As you're well aware,
This evening has been set aside fundamentally for the presentation of the proposed FY16 budget and capital plan to the board. You have received a copy of the budget message from me, and I will read a few excerpts from that, if I may. That will be followed by a PowerPoint presentation summary on the proposed budget from Finance Director Jennifer Petit. And we stand ready to answer questions or discuss further any items that would be the pleasure of the board. I also want to thank all of my colleagues, department heads, and others here from the town, and also our colleagues from the schools for being present here tonight and for all of their dedicated and steadfast work in terms of the proposed FY16 budget. As the board is well aware, this is an important first step. Much lies ahead. We'll be talking about that, including transmission consideration for transmitting this budget to the Finance Committee at the board's meeting 1 week from tonight. That would be on January 12th, and that is following the guidelines in the town charter. But I do want to acknowledge you again and thank my colleagues in attendance for their readiness to answer questions, for their hard work and dedication to playing such an important role in assembling this budget, participating actively in the series of meetings that we've held. This process began many months ago. As we're well aware, it gets started early, even though July 1, 2016 lies 6 months hence. This is important, July 1, 2015 lies 6 months hence, which is the beginning of the FY16 budget process. It's important that we start early, and we have. And I also want to thank my colleagues here for the work that they do every day in getting the basic services delivered to all the neighborhoods in the community that really contribute so much to the quality of life that we enjoy here in the town of Falmouth. So, Madam Chair, again, a few excerpts from my budget message, if I may, and if it's agreeable to the board, I will have the budget message posted on the town website tomorrow as well, but I want to present it officially to the board this evening. First of all, this fiscal year 2016 budget represents a balanced approach to modest budget increases. In furtherance of the board's policies, the town continues to fund reserves, and the town's free cash continues to increase reasonably. The FY 2016 budget continues to demonstrate disciplined, conservative revenue forecasting, along with modest budget increases, living within the limits of Proposition 2.5. As the board is aware, you annually adopt a budget policy that guides my working with my colleagues and the staff to assemble a proposed budget. Per that policy, 2.29% is allocated to budget growth, as you're aware. Also, per the board's policy, 75% of the local meals tax revenue that we enjoy annually is proposed for budget stabilization, and 25% of that same meals tax revenue is committed to the General Stabilization Fund, allowing for a contribution of $1,032,000 and $440,000 respectively, further bolstering the town's important reserves. Continuing, the FY16 budget you have before you includes a total of $187,931 in wind turbine expenses, necessarily supported by general fund revenue. I know this is not a surprise to the board. We talked about this over the last few years, and in particular focused on it a year ago. With the temporary court order issued over a year ago, the town's wind turbines are operating at less than 50% of their potential capacity. Given this, I'll be further recommending a spring town meeting warrant article that would further fund the wind turbine reserve account from free cash in the minimum amount of $100,000. Some additional comments on wind turbine revenues. The fiscal year to date, that is through the end of December, the revenue for wind turbines is $128,260.38 to be exact. This is a smaller amount than we enjoyed 1 year prior, but that is not a surprise for the reasons I noted, that we are operating at less than 50% of total capacity. The amount of $187,931 in my budget message, to which I just referred, is the necessary general fund subsidy for operating maintenance expenses in the general fund budget for the turbines. In addition to that, we have debt service payments annually slightly in excess of $400,000 on those turbines. I know that dynamic is well familiar to the board. Continuing, again, just with selected comments for my budget message in the interest of time. Proceeding in a cautious and disciplined manner, I am proposing the addition of only one new full-time position for consideration, along a delayed but very modest supplement to custodial services. This will assist with a continuing and expanding need for both year-round and seasonal custodial services, and in addition, fill in for vacations. This further represents a very modest movement towards restoring certain specific reductions in that important building maintenance area which occurred as a result of the past financial downturn. As we know, custodial services are important to the operation of all departments and across all town buildings. All departments will share in the modest benefit from this moderate change. This budget would further restore some minor clerical hours in the engineering division, which were also selectively cut back during the financial downturn, and which are important to facilitate a return to full service to the public. Further, there is a restoration of hours in a clerical support position in the fire department, which is intended to occur consistent with the implementation of the proposed consolidated dispatch facility. The police department budget includes a moderate additional budget increment to allow enhanced summer patrol, as well as the seasonal Main Street patrol. In addition, there's a budget increment to allow the retention of the important services of a domestic violence advocate within the police department. Moderate additional staffing hours have also been included in the library budget to partially restore some public service there. Minor budget increases include operational expenses in information technology, library, public safety, personnel, and selectmen. At this time, the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has indicated an upcoming health insurance rate increases that could be as much as 10 to 15%. That amount will not be formally voted on until later in January, and it is possible that that will be reduced. We anticipate some reduction. All things considered, the town is confident that a 7% increase in health insurance will suffice. This figure, though daunting, has been fully accommodated in this FY16 proposed budget. This same budget includes a 1.5% increase for the AFSCME union and non-union employees, and will also include a set-aside in a separate Springtown meeting warrant article for potential future labor contract settlements. The fire, DPW, and library contracts are negotiated and settled through June 30th, 2014, so work is underway on those as we speak. The Police Patrolmen's Federation contract is negotiated and settled through June 30th, 2017, and that is recently concluded, as the board is well aware. Again, I'm not fully touching on items in my budget message, which will be dealt with in the PowerPoint, which is soon to be forthcoming. Jumping over to capital plan, we will continue funding some smaller capital items in the annual operating budget. That's been a process that has been evolving and which will continue. Other smaller capital items will continue to be funded consistent with the annual capital plan, prudently utilizing portions of the town's available reserve of free cash. The FY16 budget continues to manage the excluded short and long-term debt so as not to increase the levy beyond the 2.5%. Recently, the Board of Selectmen approved a town refinancing of several debt issues and issued new debt to take advantage of historically low interest rates. Over the next 20 years, this refinancing will generate $880,000 in interest savings. This strategic action, along with the pay down of short-term debt, is saving Falmouth taxpayers a significant amount of interest and is consistent with managing taxpayers' revenues responsibly. And I thank the Board of Selectmen for their leadership in that regard. In conclusion, the town of Falmouth remains in strong fiscal health, continuing a moderate ongoing economic recovery. The Board of Selectmen's strategic planning, conservative and responsible budget policies, increases in reserves, and long-term financial planning are fundamental goals that lead to a strong and vibrant community. These policies provide the town the financial flexibility to reasonably and responsibly meet future challenges in continuing to deliver the local government services which we are privileged to provide to residents, businesses, and visitors. As the board is aware, per town charter, we are provided a very compact time frame to review, discuss, and conclude the executive level budget process with budget adoption, as this proposed FY16 budget is due per the charter to be transmitted to the Finance Committee on or before January 16th. I welcome the opportunity to work closely with the Finance Committee once again in the weeks to come as they undertake their important and very deliberative work on the Town of Falmouth budget. And I thank those members of the Finance Committee who were able to join us here this evening as well. I do want to thank Finance Director Jennifer Petit for her professionalism, commitment, and dedication to this critically important budget process. I thank Assistant Town Manager Heather Harper for her input and professional assistance with the evolution of this budget. I thank Town Accountant Vicki Rose, Finance and Accounting Assistant Stacy Stokes, Town Collector Pat O'Connell, and Director of Assessing Tricia Fafuli for their dedication and consistent professional work as primary members of Falmouth's Finance Department, committed to collaborating to ensure quality in the fundamental financial activities of the town of Falmouth. And I thank the board and all involved for the opportunity for all of us to be of service, and look forward to the engagement to come, the discussion to come. And Madam Chair, if it is agreeable, I could have Jennifer Petit begin
Sure, I
PowerPoint.
just thought unless someone
Yes,
had, anyone
please.
have any comments on Julian's presentation?
I have a comment, but I'll reserve it until after the presentation.
Okay, I just have one comment, and that has to do with the board's policy regarding the, how we utilize the meals tax revenue. I remember when town meeting actually voted that, and we had the meals tax revenue, which we had not had at the same level before. The board established that policy, that 75% would go to capital stabilization and 25% to general stabilization. And I just wanted to kind of remind us that when we receive the auditor's report, which will be coming up in the not-too-distant future, and the auditors will advise us as to where we are with our reserves and all of that, that we think about this policy just because we should, and whether or not it continues to meet those goals of establishing the reserves that we need to have. And if so, how we might maybe alter it in some way if need be, but just to keep in mind that it's there, and it's there for a specific purpose, and the auditors can tell us whether it's working or not. So
Excellent.
I just wanted to make that comment.
Since you
Sam?
broached that subject, that's actually what I wanted to.
Well, then make your
Let me
comment.
just piggyback on your comments. I guess I just want us to make sure that we're reflecting on how much we should be putting away in stabilization and reserve, rather than investing in the programs that we provide to the town. Because I think there needs to be a healthy balance. If we end up putting everything into reserves, then we're going to slight the year-to-year culture of our town, the quality of life that we have. So I think we need to be really careful about that. I just personally don't think we should be too much Scrooges, or else we're going to slight the town in terms of what we can offer in the way of services and quality of life. I just want to throw that out. I'm a little worried. I guess, let me just say, I'm a little concerned that the town can add a few personnel here and there by shifting the money in the budget around, but I know the school department doesn't really have that opportunity if they're trying to just struggle to maintain the same programs. And we've heard from many parents, and I've heard from plenty others, and I've reflected on my own experience of raising 2 children in Falmouth and seeing them come up through the system. We have cut back on programs. We know there are growing mental health needs among the population. We've seen the increase in the percentage of families that qualify for reduced lunch in our school population, and the school system is struggling to try to meet those needs, and they've been cutting back on staff, and we really haven't given them the opportunity to expand to try to meet some of those serious unmet needs. So I just want to mention that in terms of looking at the balance of how we look at stabilization and reserve funds versus allocating monies for operations.
Thank you, Sam. I actually brought it up because at the time that we enacted or proposed that policy and voted that policy, our reserves were not in very good shape. We had spent down our reserves during the 2008 crash and all of that. And now we were having an opportunity, especially through the meals tax and the addition to the meals tax, it was the opportunity to be able to beef up those reserves. But also at the same time, it's a policy that we have to periodically review to make sure that what we're doing is still the right thing, and that maybe there are other ways in which some of those funds could be utilized if the reserves reached a certain amount that our bonding authorities would agree with, that we have reached a capacity that we should have. So I bring that up just so that we remember from time to time that we review that policy. Doug?
I just have a numbers question. I'm guessing the numbers I see is that it's 75% and 25%, which means the bigger number should be 3 times the smaller number, and it's nowhere near that. And I'm just wondering, is that, the 75% says 1.032 million, or 1,032,000. the 25% is 440,000, and maybe this is a level of detail we don't want to get to until after Jennifer's got the question, but I don't see that it is that ratio that you said it's going to be.
Well, and I think also after we hear the auditor's report too, in terms of where we are with our reserves. Susan?
And just to follow up to what you mentioned, Mary Pat, and Sam's comment, and, you know, if no one is prepared for the number right now, maybe just something we can add to the discussion a little bit later. But I think it's so important to know the actual numbers that are allocated toward the school system, because that's brought up. Obviously, we have discussions at public comment pretty much every week by concerned parents. And so I think it's just very important to publicize the actual percentage of the budget that is spent on school-related costs, whether it's building or personnel, or, you know, we have a lot of, you know, obviously retirement issues, and I think that you know, there are some school-related costs that get put into the town budget because that's just makes more sense operationally. So it would be interesting as part of this discussion to know the actual school-related numbers so that we can, you know, look at that in terms of the needs that we're trying to serve, because it really benefits everyone to have a strong school system. That's something that property values are, you know, it's one of the foundations of property values, but I also think it's important to have all of the facts. So that's just something I wanted to bring up just by reason of your comment and Sam's. I think that's where the two meet.
And just to make it clear about the school department issue, I understand Sam's point. It is certainly on our purview to figure out how the money gets spent by the schools. And the request from the school department is being recommended by the executive committee to be met fully. And if the school department was requesting more money, we could then consider that. But I think for us to make any recommendation beyond what has come to the requests from the school committee, I think is a little bit challenging for us.
As long as we're on schools, I had a discussion with Jennifer earlier, and please, I know the superintendent and the business manager for the school department are here, but I know that in projecting their expected revenues for 2016, yes, that's the number they were expecting, and that's in working with the finance director, Jennifer Petit, but they were also hoping to get some additional Chapter 70 money, because they realized that they were suddenly qualified for an increase over above the rest of the state. This was like an extra amount that they were entitled to as a result of offering cooperative vocational education and training. I believe that's what CVET stands for. But in talking to Jennifer today, that projection for Chapter 70 funding is set based on last year's contribution. And to tap that, we'd have to wait until after it comes through and not be able to get it except through a special town meeting article in November. And that precludes them committing to staffing up to provide teachers' aides, libraries, and things, those programs that have been cut back. So I think we have a revenue availability issue here that perhaps they may want to speak to, but that's my understanding of where they're going to be limited, even though they hope to have sufficient revenues to expand some of the programs to address some of the unmet needs, but we may not actually be able to provide them the authority to actually invest that money.
I think we should move to the presentation.
I think
And I
so.
think those are all very good points to make, and they certainly relate to the overall school budget. Our portion of it is obviously a part of that, but it's not all of it. But I think it's time to hear the presentation from Jennifer. You ready? Okay, let's go.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present the budget this evening. It's probably one of my favorite parts of the job, is to present the budget. And then we'll ask that question again as the night progresses.
I'm good.
So thank you. I'm going to just walk around a little bit. When I was putting the presentation together, what I really wanted to accomplish is I wanted to build a little bit on the presentation that we had last summer.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to shut another light
Yeah,
off?
one.
One more.
It was-
One right over the screen.
There we go.
Yeah.
No, one more.
Want another one?
There you go.
Thank you. I wanted to build a little bit. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody who helped put the budget together in the finance department. They're extremely helpful, shifting work around, and especially a thank you to Stacy Stokes. She's our new assistant to the finance director and town accountant, and she put a lot of work in helping assembling the budget, and a lot of support there. So I just wanted to thank them. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to build a little bit on the presentation that we had last summer. We did somewhat of a workshop with the school committee and the finance committee and the board of selectmen, and we talked about, putting a budget together and what goes into the budget. And it was a lengthy discussion, and it seemed, fruitful, if you will. So I'm going to kind of build on that a little bit and go over it a little bit. It's always good to just refresh our memories on what we do to put the budget together. Revenues and expenses. The reoccurring theme here is that reoccurring revenues need to fund reoccurring expenses. And what are our reoccurring revenues? There are property taxes, our state aid, our estimated local receipts, and other available funds that are set aside other than the general fund that support the budget. And just to give you an idea, what we look at one-time revenues are free cash and reserves. And I'll get into, there's been some discussion here this evening already about reserves, and I'll talk about that and answer any questions you may have. The good news is that we're funding our reserves from reoccurring revenue, so we're able to do that every year. It went very well with the bond rating agencies when we had our conference call with the debt refinancing. But when we take the money out of the reserves, that's really a one-time revenue. It's not a reoccurring revenue. So that's really what the difference is here. And our sources of revenue. As you can see from the pie chart, the majority of the sources of revenue are property taxes. And then we have our local receipts, state aid, and this is your other available funds. Now, our property taxes, by law, we only can increase our property taxes by 2.5%. And it's really not property taxes, I should say the levy. So what we bill the community every year can only increase by 2.5% by law. If we increase beyond the 2.5%, it has to be appropriated at town meeting, and then it would go to a ballot vote. And then we project new growth. Traditionally, we've been projecting about $600,000 a year, and we've been actually bringing in a little bit more for various reasons. But that's really to be conservative and have a place to go. It really, we've been looking at around $600,000. And we have state aid. The majority of our state aid is Chapter 70, our school education aid, unrestricted government aid, which is really your old lottery aid, and then reimbursements. We get reimbursements for school choice. School choice goes directly to the school. It does not go to the general fund for direct appropriation. The only thing the school cannot spend school choice on are capital items, but they can support their budget with school choice. Charter school and veterans benefits and property tax exemptions. Estimated local receipts. That's our departmental revenue, if you will. Motor vehicle excise, we just had a discussion on the hotel, motel, and meals tax. 100% of the meals tax is allocated to capital in our general stabilization fund. And that was a policy that was voted on a few years ago when you implemented the meals tax. And that was really at a time when the town of Falmouth had depleted their reserves. And just a reminder, as I've gone through, and this happened before I came, but I know that at one point the bond rating agencies had a watch because our reserves were depleted so low and the economy had gone down and our estimated receipts had been going down. And so, the policies that have been in place are conservative and have been able to build up our reserves, which makes us a real strong financial community. Departmental revenue, your water and sewer revenues, your beach parking revenues, licenses and permits, ambulance, and other. And these revenue sources really can be an indicator of the economy. When people aren't buying new cars, your motor vehicle excise will go down. You would have seen that in 2009 and 2010. Your departmental revenue, building permits, that's an indication of really what's happening in the economy. Property taxes. Your new growth increased $200,000 over what was estimated last year. And that number doesn't come in usually until September or October before we set our tax rate, because our cutoff for new growth of calculating it is June 30th. And we did utilize our debt drop-off capacity. On the short-term debt, you'll notice that we are appropriating $2.4 million, which will go to the Little Pond Source Service, the Little Pond project. And we've been using that debt drop-off. As your debt drops off on the unexcluded debt, we vote new debt just to steady the levy. And I can get into that a little bit more when we go through the numbers. Estimated local receipts. According to the Board of Selectmen's budget policy, we don't increase our estimated local receipts unless we have a new revenue source to maybe support a position or, something of that nature. So we balance our budget on 18 million in estimated local receipts, but when we actually set our tax rate, that number can go down because there's certain factors of rounding that you need to do when you're actually setting your tax rate. And so if you look at the history, we set our tax rate on $50,000 less than the 18 million that we projected. And that really just goes to free cash, which is another part of the policy of having your undesignated fund balance as a certain percentage of your budget. That's actually why the free cash gets higher, is because that's really the target area. And one thing I wanted to mention is when you look at your budget overview sheet, you will see an additional $40,000. And we did not increase the estimated local receipts per the Board of Selectmen's policy. We didn't increase them to balance the budget. But when we qualified and received the qualified energy conservation bonds, we had to put the gross amount appropriated in the budget and use $40,000 as an offset on the estimated receipts. So that's really what that is. And then you have your other available funds, parking meter revenues, embarkation fees, wetlands and waterways. And when we go to town meeting in April, you'll see this when we vote the budget, you'll see these revenue sources supporting the budget, which we've been doing. A lot of it supports the debt. The energy receipts supports the debt in the budget. The golf revenues support the debt. The community preservation amount is supporting the debt for the old land bank and the community preservation. Bond premiums, we could spend all night talking about bond premiums, but I don't want to confuse anybody. But basically, when we go out to the bond market, we usually get a premium. And we use that premium. When we allocate the debt in the budget, we have to allocate the gross debt of what we have to pay. The premium comes into a net interest cost, and it offsets that debt. And especially, it's really with excluded debt. So the community will get the benefit of the premium. That's really what happens. And if you have any questions, I can answer that. I might not be explaining that perfectly, but I have it in my mind. Redistribution of unexpended capital fish ladder funds. Now, what does that mean? Well, we do have in the budget the part-time shellfish. It's a salaried, it comes under salaries. It's a temporary position that we've been using for 3 years for the shellfish. It came out of the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. And we want to incorporate that into the budget. We're not using the article because it is salary. So we have a capital article that we didn't expend all the funds. So we're using that money to offset that salary just for this year. And then we will either incorporate, the 3-year period will be over of the demonstration project, and if we want to continue funding it in the budget, then we will next year. But we wanted to get it in this year, just because it's, paying from salaries, and we did have extra capital money around, and so we're distributing that capital money. So when you look at the FY16 operating budget, this will really kind of tell you the percentages. This is the school. This is the this is the debt service. These are your employee benefits. And then we have public safety, public works, community development, general government. This is really it gives you a visual of the piece of the pie of what we're appropriating. Our appropriations, our operating budget. As you know, we just went through a major refinancing and issued new debt to the tune of about $17 million. And we saved about $800,000 over the next 20 years. And so you will see that is we reallocated and adjusted all the debt schedules for FY16, so they're all up to date in the budget. We issued some new excluded debt for the water treatment facility because we had such a low interest rate that we really wanted to take advantage of that. But it's all within our debt drop-off. And so we didn't want to, spike the levy, so we're just, bonding some of it, and some of it will be paid off on the short-term debt, and you can see that in your budget book as well. Education, the school department, we've been talking every week with the school department. In the Board of Selectmen's budget policy, it was a 2.29% budget allocation, and that was what was voted. So for simplicity, when we talked to the school department, it was 2.29%. I think the budget has been going very well. This year, if you remember last year, we did account for some health insurance increases. This year, we did not account for any of the health insurance increases, and we're putting 7% in the budget, which is a large number. Last year, we only had 3%. So, when talking with the schools, it's been the 2.29%, and have been working with them about allocating, those budget needs. Health insurance. Right now, I have 7% in the budget. It may trend higher. As Julian mentioned, that the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group originally was looking at 10 to 15%. Now I think they're coming maybe 8 to 12%. And I just want to explain this a little bit. When they look at their health, the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has a finance policy where they have a set of reserves, like the town does. And they want to keep a reserve from $8 to $12 million. And last year, I believe the reserves were a little bit more than the $12 million. And what they've been traditionally voting is to take money from the reserves to artificially reduce the rates for health insurance. So every community is not every year coming up with 10 to 15%. And so this year, they feel that they're a little bit low on their reserves, and they're looking at a higher increase, but they will vote probably some part of those reserves to artificially reduce the rate. So what I've been doing, and I've been talking about it the last couple years, I don't budget for the net increase, because then the next year, if they have a higher increase, it's really going to up your budget. I've always been putting in, since I've been here, and I've done it in other communities, I try to hit more of the growth. So if they're looking at a 7% increase one year, but they might vote it down to 5%, I might put the 7 in there. Or it might be somewhere in between to try to build up that reserve, if you will. And so here I have a 7% increase in health insurance. And if it came in at 9% or 10%, we'd still be okay with the 7%. And that's what we've been doing every year. So we don't get hit really hard of budgeting 1% one year and then having to go budget 9% the next year, because then you're going to be looking at budget cuts. So 7% is what I have right now. It might even go down. And if it goes down, then we'll probably reallocate some of that money to other budgets. We're still looking at a utility bid, electricity bid that will come in February. The retirement. The retirement board just voted to shorten the schedule for the unfunded liability by 5 years. And that looks like that's a 5% increase every year, not including an actuarial study that they'll do every 2 years to adjust for that. What that does is really good for the town. It will be great for the bond rating agencies, because we'll be funding our unfunded liability sooner. And what this does as well is if we do run into some difficult years like we did in 08, 09, and 10 with our investments, it gives us the ability to maybe, if we had to, push this out again, so we wouldn't be looking at large increases. A 5% increase is probably around $350,000. So, we always want to make sure that we're smoothing that increase with retirement. And again, the whole theme to the budget is, your reoccurring revenues, but when you're putting the appropriations together, you kind of want to look forward, so you're not going to get hit one year with a really high budget increase where it will force you to cut back on services. Insurance.
Jennifer, could I
Yes.
just ask a question? So what is the actual year that they've cut back to, like 2032 or?
I think it's 2032.
2032?
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Insurance. There is a 33% increase for insurance, particularly workers' compensation and property and liability. The workers' compensation, we've been funding the workers' comp trust fund in the past years to the tune of about $50,000. We should be funding it more, and we will be funding it more in this budget. We're asking for $100,000, plus we wanted to put more in the operating budget to hedge against future increases. We wanted to put as much as we can, so we're looking at that. And the property and liability, we're looking at that going up probably around 10%. That's always a good figure right now to start with. And it's been lower in past years, but we want to make sure that we have that money. And if that goes down, or if we have any, that might be another place. There might be a little bit of room to move. Electricity. Gas prices are definitely going down, and sometimes the utilities kind of mirror gas prices, but not so with electricity. We've been hearing about increases. And we are part of a regional municipal bid, and we're expected to get that in sometime in February. And so when we get that in, we'll look at reallocation at that point. Last year, if you remember, we went out to bid for 1 year, and we had a 20% increase. But it's 20% increase excluding the delivery. So it's like a 20% increase on 60% of your bill. And when you analyze it this year, and you look at from FY14 to FY15, the FY14, the delivery actually went down a little bit, although the rates went up, the 20%. So there is some room in the budgets. We really need to get that number in when the bid comes in, and then we'll look at maybe some reallocation like we did last year. So the amount is really unknown at this point, but we are expecting it, and we have a plan if it increases. And also the energy and conservation measures with the ESCO will diminish the impact for school in town for next year. Contractual salary increases. We usually put in an amount in the town accountant's budget, and when the union negotiation is completed and the contract signed, we reallocate that to the budgets. The problem or the issue that we run into is that we really need to close that out right away, and it doesn't really give us any flexibility of keeping that money in the budget. So we want to propose this as a separate town meeting warrant article. We can keep that open for a little while longer, but we're only putting the money in of the planned and anticipated COLA increases that have been established. So next year we've established a 1.5%, and that's really what this amount is. It's just 1.5%, and we're just putting it in a warrant article instead of putting it in the operating budget. And consistent with the wage pattern we've all been discussing. And as Julian went over in his budget message, we have minor budget increases. The single full-time custodian, the domestic violence advocate under contractual services, and some smaller capital items. We increased the funding for police cruisers to $100,000, and we put some money in for the marine float markers. And they have a modest increase for restoration and hours for the library, fire, planning, and engineering. Funding reserves. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this. Right now we're funding, according to the Board of Selectmen's budget policy, we're funding $1,032,000 to the Capital Stabilization Fund. This was established when the meals tax was adopted because we didn't have a capital stabilization fund. We hadn't been funding our capital. We really was in need of really putting that aside. And we have been putting that aside. Right now we probably have $2.3 million in there, and so this would bring it up to over $3 million. And then with your stabilization fund was depleted. And if you look at the calculation for the meals tax, the 25% is less than the 440. But because we haven't reached a benchmark for our general stabilization, I didn't want to decrease our stabilization fund because we really haven't reached the reserve of where we want to be. So we definitely want to level fund that. And I think that comes to what Sam's question is why are we funding reserves when we really need the money for the operating budget? Well, we need the reserves when, the economy starts going down, and if you run into a real problem. We've seen it before with the wind turbines. You're not bringing in the revenue to support the operating. Sometimes you need to tap into a stabilization fund. Right now our budget's $120 million with excluded debt. You take the excluded debt out of it, it's about $105 million. You want to be around 5 to 10% of your operating budget in your stabilization fund. We probably have about $4 million. We want another 3 at least, I would say, right now, to feel comfortable. And then you can look at maybe cutting back. Your capital stabilization, that's really a policy the board's really wants to discuss on how we're going to utilize our capital stabilization money. That money's set aside, but that's money we don't have to borrow that we'll save interest on. So we really need to analyze our capital needs and find out, where do we go to the capital stabilization fund? Is it something maybe over $1 million, between $1 million and $2 million? But you have 2 projects that are $1.5 million. You've just depleted your capital stabilization fund. So that's something, that you really want to look at. You're looking at a senior center. I mean, that's something that you could save up for. There's a lot of things that you can do. And when we went through the refinancing and we were talking, you want fiscal stability, because when the revenues decrease, you want to fund, your operations so you can give a service to the level service that you're giving to the community. And it's really important. It's something that they look at. It's something that the Department of Revenue looks at. And another part of it is continuing to fund the other post-employment benefits trust fund at $100,000. And this really kind of drives home the point. Our unfunded liability for our other post-employment benefits, and what's that? That's health insurance. They look at it as everybody retired today, what would our liability be? Our liability is, I think it's $80 million, something, it's just this number that how are we ever going to get to? And there isn't a requirement to fund it right now. We need to put it on our financial statements. But what the issue is other communities are funding it. And so we kind of have to go with the flow with everybody else, because the bond rating agencies look at us when we do that. And if we're not funding OPEB and everybody else is, because we're putting our money towards our operating budget and not increasing our reserves, they want to know why. The bond rating goes down, you're paying higher interest costs, and you're more vulnerable. And so you just want to have a healthy reserve. You don't always have to put $1.5 million away for your reserves, but you want to do it until you get to where you really want to be. And the OPEB trust is really an important part of that. They're really communities and DOR and the Standard & Poor's really look at that to see the health of the community. And so really what the good thing is, you see other communities, they might have a high free cash one year. They might be anticipating $1 million, $1.5 million, so they'll throw $500,000 into it. That's great, but they won't have it next year, or they won't have it the year after. But the plan that the Board of Selectmen has adopted through their budget policy is we're funding this every year through reoccurring revenues. So you're going to get to your goal a lot quicker. We're just not there yet. It's only been going on for the last 2 or 3 years. Other non-voted appropriations. I discussed this because this is something that I have to keep in mind when I put the budget together. When the town sets their tax rate in November, we take all the appropriations that have been voted. At that time, we know what the assessments are from the state. We know what the money is coming in from state revenue, and we put it into this big spreadsheet program, and we hope that it balances out, but it does balance out. And part of that is we have to allocate money for state assessments and allowance for abatements. That's something that town meeting does not vote. That's something that you can put on your recap sheet and raise. And it kind of brings up another point that I want to, last year we had snow and ice, a high amount of money was spent for snow and ice. Over $600,000, it was more than $600,000. We funded $600,000 at the special town meeting, but we were still $200,000 short at the end of the fiscal year. And our new growth came in, at around $800,000. And actually, our state assessments were lower than what I anticipated, which gave us room. And so I raised $170,000 on the tax recap sheet, which I can do without a town meeting vote. It's an appropriate means of, overexpending. It's for public safety. So the conclusion, when you look at your budget overview, and I can walk you through this if you'd like, your total appropriation increases 2.62%. Now you voted 2.29% in your budget policy, and the difference really is the debt and the revenue that has to support that. The other available funds went up about $100,000. You also increase in estimated receipts because the way I had to account for the qualified energy conservation bonds. And when you look at that, and we adjusted the FY15 budget of what the votes were, that's what the appropriation is, but the difference is the revenue supporting it. You're in a part of that where it's really hard to really pick it out from the budget overview, is that we have our ESCO project. We received a grant on the qualified energy conservation bonds, and so when I put together the refinancing, I put that in there because you needed to bond within 6 months in order to take advantage of the subsidy from the federal government. And I also bonded the $2.5 million because the interest rates were so low. And when I did that, you did see an increase in the debt of about $230,000 for the ESCO project. And I haven't really, the savings to pay for that, but I haven't pulled that out of the budget because we do see utility increases go up. I know the school will save about $30,000 on their T-ticket, the new boilers and T-ticket, but, they can use that to maybe mitigate some of the electricity or however they want to, but that's how we've been dealing with that. We've had the fixed cost increases that I discussed. This budget does allow for flexibility. State aid, we've level funded state aid right now. They are looking at a deficit this year. We have a new governor coming in. And let me just touch upon another, something that Selectmen, that Sam mentioned, was about the CVTE funds. The governor, since there's a new governor, he has an extra 5 weeks to put in his proposed budget. Now, last year, Governor Patrick, in his budget, we had an additional $300,000 for Chapter 70, and then the legislature voted to for a local aid amendment, so they weren't going to touch local aid. So when we went into the April town meeting, we were confident we were going to get that $300,000. Now, with the extra 5 weeks, and he's trying to wrap his head around the numbers, and he's made a statement that he does not want to cut local aid. So I'm confident with the level funding, but that's where the CVTE funds come in and the calculation. And if you look at the calculation for the CVTE funds, it's very complicated. You need your net school spending numbers, you need your foundation budget, and if it does come in, then we can vote it in November before we set the tax rate. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get any information on state aid as soon as we did last year at this time. And this budget plan does allow for modest future funding of some unmet town-wide capital needs. Because we're not increasing our estimated receipts, it does allow us for some free cash, which helps us fund our capital budget. So not increasing the estimated receipts at this time does help that. And we do have the continued implementation and further explanation of departmental reorganization and cost-saving measures. The town manager continues to look at this, as you know, with consolidated dispatch. So we're always looking at ways that we can save money and operate more efficiently in the budget. I could walk you through the budget overview if you'd like, and show you the calculation for the property tax, but it might be a little bit much at this point, so I'll leave that up to you, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So you have that number I was looking for, which is the real percentage of the budget that goes to anything having to do with the schools?
I do have that. I do have the numbers, and let me just answer that question. It might be a little bit lengthy, but just to give everybody an idea. At the end of the year, the school department prepares what's called the school end of the year report, and they look at next year's budget and they look at actual costs this year, and it helps them. It sits in the net school spending calculation, and we do have a formula, a lengthy spreadsheet of how much of the money that's in the town budget is allocated to the school. Now, a big part of that, $5 million, you can see it broken down in your budget overview. It will say school health insurance, but also there's a percentage for property and liability insurance, workers' comp, unemployment. There is a big part of the town budget. Also, on the state assessments that I was discussing when we set the tax rate, we have $2.7 million in state assessments. $1.3 million are charter school assessments for schools, for children leaving the district. So there's really a lot involved when you're looking at school costs. So I don't have anything plain and simple and say this is the percentage. But another big piece of that are grants. So we have other available funds, which is in, when we get a federal grant, sometimes it will offset some. It does offset, school expenses. So when you're looking for the total school expenses, looking at that end-of-year report, which is comprehensive, it's probably 50, 60 pages, we can pull out, and I did last year, somebody had asked for it, I maybe pulled out 10 categories to, let everybody see, how much it really is costing to operate the schools. Because then you also have the debt service, the ESCO is a shared project, but more importantly, you also have the high school. So really, what you're looking at. And so the DESC, which is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is to the school system, which is the Department of Revenue is to the town, really has those costs. And I think the end-of-year school report was submitted. And so we could get a copy and maybe,
Just to follow up on it. So just for now, can we go by last year's numbers? For example, the pie chart was something like 34%. What would the real pie chart number be? Just based on last year, if we don't have this year.
Well, I don't calculate it that way, so I don't have those numbers. Usually, that pie chart is just, you can look at it this way, it's the general fund, it's the money and the property taxes coming into the general fund, supporting the operating budget. So I don't break down the town budget of what we're spending on our side that actually goes to the school. Because we're not appropriating it that way, we're appropriating it on the town side, because that will eventually become, after review from the Selectmen and the Finance Committee, will become the vote of town meeting. So I don't have it broken down, but it'd probably be more like 55% if you're looking for a percentage.
Thank you.
And I can get that to you, I can calculate that.
So I'm glad you made that clear, that that chart you had really simply shows the amount of the property tax, how that is appropriated for each of the areas, public safety, debt service. and
Right, the
whatnot.
four sources of right.
It's just the property
Right.
tax. Yeah. I wanted to make a comment too, when you get to the retirement, I always like to take the opportunity to say something about it, because so many people have the idea that towns pay for all the retirements of municipal employees, and that's just not really the case. And if you look today, if a person who, well, since the legislature mandated that employees put in 11% of their salary each pay period, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, into their own retirement. 9% under 30,000, and if you make over 30,000, it's another 2% on that. So it comes out to be 11%. So you think, how many people in the private sector take 11% of their income and put it into a savings account? Not very many people. So a young person today, 23, 22, decides to become an employee in a municipality and stays there for, say, 32 or 33 years, that person will have put in 112% of their income into the retirement system. So they're paying for their own retirement. And over the years, that has evolved so that there's still a lot of people now who don't fit into that category. But the average retirement income on Cape Cod, the average retiree earns $19,000 a year in retirement. And people seem to think somehow that it's a whole lot of money, but it isn't. So I always like to say that when there's an opportunity, because you people probably all know it because you're municipal or school employees, but people in the general public just really believe that the towns are paying for the retirement of all of their employees, and that's just simply isn't the case. Not all of it, a portion of it. As you bring up, the town does make a contribution each year into the retirement system, but it doesn't fund the entire retirement. I just have to say that. Only because I'm on the Barnstable County Retirement Association, and I get a lot of questions about it, and it's, and especially people from the public that just don't know. You had a question, Sam.
Yeah, well, first, I think, if I understand, I wanted to clarify, you said that what we see in the operating budgeted amount for each of the departments comes strictly out of the real estate taxes?
No, I
It
was
covers
saying the
four
pie
certain-
chart that she showed
Oh,
us
okay.
shows the percentage of how the property tax is allocated. That's all. It's not the budget, it's just the property tax.
Let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to share a plot that I was given. The numbers have not been vetted, all right? And I'm worried because I don't think it does show all of the town's investment in the education of its children. And I've already talked to Jennifer about seeing if we can't come up with that graph, which I think would be a more accurate representation of what we invest in the education of our children. But I at least want to pass this along because at least the initial indication is that the percentage that's been going to the schools has actually been declining. And that is, I think, something that a lot of people believe.
Well, except why are we talking about this if the numbers haven't been vetted? It sounds like it has such a high potential to be misleading.
Well, that's my point.
Maybe we should hold that until we get a real...
The source would be right out of these budget numbers, which are only a portion of what the school children receive.
So what is the source of the document, then?
Would be budget values. Nick, you want to speak?
Oh, you're the source of the document.
I compiled that.
Wait a minute, excuse me, if you want, would you come up to the lectern?
Nick Lowell, I'm the Vice Chairman of the Finance Committee. This is a project that I've been working on for a number of years, and what it is numbers pulled directly from the annual reports. So these are not actually budget numbers, these are actual expenses. And I've gone back to 2002 and pulled out what the numbers are for the major departments. It was something that actually Gary Anderson had originally suggested to me, and I went ahead and did that a few years ago, and so I've just updated it over the last few years. Talking about it with Sam, he was interested, so I gave him a copy. So those are numbers. I would say they're not vetted only in the sense that they haven't been rigorously proofread by somebody else, but the numbers, to my best of my ability, are straight out of the annual reports. So when you look and you'll see, sorry, I don't actually have a copy with me, but when you see the public schools, let's say, that is, if you go into the annual report, look at what the school expenditures were for 2014, boom, that's the dollar figure that goes into it. You look in public safety, that's police and fire. Police and fire departments combined, showing the public safety number, retirement, etc. So it does not, in Susan's point, it does not attempt to include a comprehensive view of debt, of retirement, of health insurance, straight out of those line numbers. Because once you get into that, it is very complicated. And I mean, Jennifer, I've talked about it with Jennifer before, and it's very complicated. How do you allocate exactly, you know, if a snowplow plows out the school, what percentage of that time do you allocate to the school if they're already driving by the street, you know, who knows. But, so this is just a way of doing it, trying to do it as, with the most objective numbers possible, which in my view is the annual report showing actual expenses.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Can I just comment on this? Because I was trying to make sense out of the decline that you see here. And certainly, having been on the school committee for 16 years before being elected to Selectmen, there's been a steady decline in student enrollment. But over the last 3 years, that decline stopped. But right now, it's suggesting that the proportion that's being allocated to the schools is still declining, and that's bothering me a little bit, because it seems to me that we need to really take another look at that and ask that question: are we adequately meeting the needs of the children in this town? So I just want to really, I'm throwing it out because I think we really do need those numbers from Jennifer to tell us what the actual overall investment is in the town, as best we can estimate it, given, you know, support by the Parks Department and all the insurance, because I think that'll give us the best indicator of what kind of investment we're making in education in Falmouth.
Is there still a document called a Schedule 19? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. That's the end-of-year report. So you have Schedule 19, you have Schedule 1. One looks at what we actually spent in the last fiscal year, and then it looks at the budget year we're in. And it has a method to do that that's pretty, you know, consistent over
That's
the
a
years.
document that the finance director, so to speak, or the finance department or the town has to send to DOR every year?
It's something that the school compiles. It originates with the school department because you're looking at grants and, you know, a lot of, not just, you know, general fund. You're looking at all the other revenue that comes into the schools, you know, maybe school choice and grants and things of that nature. Some of the revolving funds, and the school business manager will compile that report and send it into DESE, which is audited every year by our auditors. And so we do have those reports, they're public record. We just submitted the FY14 report, and there is a component that the town accountant calculates of what the town percentage is that is looked at, given, supports the school system.
And I think that's another report that ought to be looked at if we're going to, compare things. Because that's the official report that is sent to the state.
Exactly.
I just remember it from
And audited by-
years in the municipality.
And it is audited as well.
Yeah, and it's an audited document
Yes.
as well. Okay, so let's.
I think to just look at the expenses as Nick pulled out, and not, at least in some place, remind ourselves of the capital funds that went into the schools also, and say, yes, the annual expenses went down, but there was a lot of money that did go into capital projects.
Well, that report actually includes that. And I have FY13.
These numbers do?
No.
No.
This is that DESE
Right.
report, where the numbers from that DESE report that Jennifer was alluding to.
The section 19, you mean?
Well, I don't know whether it's that terminology or not, but there is at least a report that's compiled by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that attempts to include all the costs that any given municipality invests in the education of its children on an annual basis.
Okay, well, that might be a topic for another discussion, but I think we need to move on to our budget overview that we have here tonight.
Yeah, Madam
So,
Chair, we're happy
yeah.
to answer questions that the board may have.
So I suppose we
further
could
elaborate.
start with, well, I was looking at, we have a two-page, yeah, why don't you put it up on the screen? General government, public safety, what was voted, what the requests were, what's recommended, and any changes, and we could go through that. I was actually comparing it to last year, and there aren't significant differences, really, when you look at it overall. There are some, but not many.
Did you want to look at the departmental, or did you want to look at the first two pages?
Well, I don't know, let's talk to the board about this. Do you want to go over the overview sheet, which is the budget overview, or do you want to start first with the departmentals?
I think that's
Like the town clerk would be,
what I would prefer.
all right, then let's do that. So,
It's very, an Excel spreadsheet that's very difficult to bring up, but you can walk through it.
You have the phone. You can go through the book, though.
What?
You can go through the book.
yeah, through the book.
section by
That's what I
section.
was going to do, is start with general government, which is the town clerk. So let's take it department by department.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah.
Are we doing it this way, or?
Or if you want to just go to the book, it might be easier to put this on.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, can I just clarify the stabilization funds, just to make sure I understand the numbers you were saying? The 440 for the general stabilization and the 1.032 for capital stabilization. The 440, we were using really the 25 and 75% as guidelines, and the 440 is actually more than 25%. You're saying that the interpretation of the board's policy is at least 25% of the meals tax needs to go to that, and you're saying actually we're putting a little bit more.
Yeah, and let me just give you a little bit of history. When I first came here, 440 was appropriated to the stabilization fund. I'm not sure where that came from. I think part of that was the meals tax calculation, but when I assembled the budget and we really wanted to reach a certain, part of the reserves, I never wanted to decrease it, so I level funded it at the 440, which includes the meals tax, so it is more.
The history, I think, was that there was also, that a few years ago, 1/4% of the 2.5% increase was allocated towards the stabilization fund. And so adding those two percentages together created a total of 440.
Oh, okay.
And you're now saying, well, we're using 440 as our level funding.
Yeah, I didn't want to
Because-
decrease it.
Right, okay. I understand that now, thank you.
Okay, so if we go to the town clerk, if you go to the third page in, which is the town clerk department, it gives you the overview. And you can just look at this and see that probably the increase is due mostly to salaries, rather than any programmatic increases. Mike is here. Michael, did you want to make any comment on your budget? It's pretty much similar to the previous year.
I don't know what you just said, that the increases due to increases in personnel.
Right.
Discretionary funds in there, other than if you want to call supplies, and the discretionary fund is how many came from by, everything else is just requirements of that.
And I'm sure, I actually think going through that level of detail is really what the finance committee is going to do. And for us to have the department heads go through us each page.
No, I don't think each page, just the overview page.
Okay, all right.
I mean, if this is what you would like to do. I mean, that's
I think the
normally
overview
what we do,
page
is
is
we
fine.
go through each department, but we just go through the basic overview page. We don't go through all the level of detail, the programmatic
Okay.
portion of it. Okay, the finance department. That's usually the finance, that's Jennifer.
Yes, they're just contractual salary increase. There was a savings with an accounts payable clerk. We took that position and we made it part-time. With our new software system, it was a little bit more decentralized with the departments entering their own invoices, so we were able to take that full-time position and make it part-time. So there was some savings there. But other than that, it was really level funded, a little bit here and there, increases for meetings and things like that.
I think that's what I observe in reading it, is pretty much level funded, other than salaries. The finance committee, I know Nick is here, there's absolutely no change to the finance committee. They get the same amount of money every year. Yes.
Can I ask a question? Because
Sure.
it is a reserve fund, per se, and I'm not sure how it's used. I just would like to be educated.
This is something that came up at town meeting, is in the event that the police department's communication system had broken down, there would be a reserve fund that's available for emergencies.
At the discretion of the finance committee?
Yes.
Correct.
So it's an extra reserve fund.
It's an
Well,
emergency.
it's the reserve fund.
Right.
It's,
It's not a stabilization, it's for a certain amount of money.
Thank you.
Let me elaborate a little bit on that. It's for extraordinary and unforeseen expenses in the same fiscal year. So if something extraordinary happens in the budget, an unforeseen expense, sometimes we use this for snow and ice, or if you had a lot of overtime that we needed to fund right away. We'll probably be going to asking or requesting from the Finance Committee, from the Reserve Fund, some money for workers' compensation that has been coming in recently. So it's to fund the same fiscal year, and it gives really the town, and every town does have a reserve fund, the flexibility to meet those needs if something comes up without having to call a special town meeting and appropriate the money.
legal services. There is an increase, and I think we know what it is. It's for special counsel, and we know why, because we have a number of cases that are coming into court this year, and that necessitates the increase in the legal services budget. Becky?
I just noticed about the rent and the lease of the building for legal services. Is there any movement that they may not be renting or leasing next year? Is there anything that's happened? Or we're keeping that rent and lease amount?
Well, yeah, Madam Chair, I'm happy to address that. We do have a plan that's still evolving that, consistent with the direction of the Board of Selectmen, would be bringing town departments, including legal services that are within rental space into town-owned properties. We don't have an exact timeline for that yet, but we are working with an architect and anticipate that we'll have some significant movement on that within the fiscal year 16. I don't have an exact date on when that would occur, so as a result, this continues present trends. But we are renting on a month-by-month basis, so we do not have a long-term contract there.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Finneran?
You're going through all these numbers, and there are people here, and there's also the public at home. They're at quite a disability. I just thought that this would be on the PowerPoint, and we will all be able to see it. That doesn't seem to be the case, and is there any reason why that is the case?
Well, it's something that we don't usually do. This is usually a discussion between the department heads and the selectmen.
It's the public's money, though.
That's very true. Okay, any further comments on the legal budget? And let's move to human resources. I'm very happy to see that there's a very slight increase in professional training. Where's Denise? There you are.
Right.
That's great. Do you want to come to the microphone?
Sure.
Okay. It was always a big issue for me as a human resources director that there be money in the budget for training, and I'm glad to see it there.
Yes, I had reviewed and proposed an increase in our professional training to both Jennifer, Heather, and Julian, and they were very open to it. We really want to make sure we're investing in training, a series of trainings for our department heads and leaders, and also at the staff level, and also want to make sure that we have appropriated a small amount for any type of recognition programs that might be created in the future. So we're very pleased that we're able to invest in our employees again.
Any questions for Denise? Don't fall over, but the first year I went to Plymouth was 1996, and the selectmen gave me $25,000 for training. Imagine that. Huh?
Wow.
That was the last time. Okay, information technology. Some big changes in information technology, I see.
I guess I would have a question, just to
Sure.
make sure that we're really clear into why we expended around $50,000 this year and are expecting $140,000 in the computer system next year.
We've converted our old computer software, especially our accounting. It's now, we're fully implemented in our accounting, so instead of programming it ourselves, we've gone to what's called SoftWrite, and it's really a canned software program. It's on the cloud, and so there is a fee to that, and so that's the fee for next year.
And so it's going to be
It's a license fee, because we converted our software to a different software.
And so this increase is going to be an increase we're going to see level funded. It's not going to go back down. It isn't that this year we're putting a bunch of money in. It's what it's going to be from now on.
No, it will be there. It will stay there, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Find my blue sheets here. GIS.
Increase of $1,200. That's just terrible.
An increase of $1,200. Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
in
sure.
that same tab, earlier on, there was Selectmen.
Did I miss that?
Town manager. Right
Oh,
after town clerk, in
sorry
the event
about
that
that.
the board would have any questions about that, I wouldn't
Well, let's go back
want
to
to
it then.
suggest that you want to overlook that. I think it's the second blue tab in that same section. Section 3.
Okay, so let's go back to Selectmen and Administration.
I did have one question about
Sure.
I was surprised on the out-of-state travel, not as much as what we were budgeting as that we spent so little in 2014. That-
Yeah. We had a Boston conference in 2014
Okay.
For international professional associations, so it was.
So it was in state.
Yes, that eliminated,
So that made the in-state up higher, and the
Yes.
out-of-state was lower.
correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Good catch, though. That's exactly what happened.
Okay, Becky?
I think there's a little humor on removing junk vehicles.
On what?
Removing junk vehicles.
Oh, junk vehicles?
Line item.
That comes under our jurisdiction,
Yeah.
as
Right.
opposed to any others.
It's within the selectmen's domain. So, no offense implied.
Okay.
It's an historic title, goes back a long time.
No reference to personal vehicles here.
All right, let's go to Conservation Commission. In tight times, it's not really, we're not looking at major changes in these budgets. Any questions on Concom? No? Let's go to the Planning Board. Anything you want to mention, Brian? What? No? Move to the next one?
Oh, more, yeah.
Any questions on Planning Board? The ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals? That's pretty standard. And the building inspection. Anything you want to comment on, Eladio, on your budget? It's pretty, not too exciting either, I would say, huh? Health inspections?
I had a question, hazardous waste collection, this is not as much of a budget issue as making sure that people understand exactly the way it does work. And our participation in the Cape-wide hazardous waste services. I'm not sure if there's someone here who can explain it better than I'm going to try to, but, so I'd first throw that out there. Do we have someone from the?
David's here.
I think, I don't know if David can address that or not. If he's,
There's a Board of Health meeting that he had to attend.
That's true.
okay,
yeah.
yeah, they're meeting
That's right.
downstairs. Yeah.
My understanding is that there are 4 different collections that are done in the part of the Cape, and any Falmouth resident can take their hazardous waste to any of those 4. One of them does occur in Falmouth, and I think that one typically in April, and that is expense that is covered within our budget, but just to encourage people, instead of taking it to the dump, instead of taking it out to the curb or putting it down the drains, please take advantage of the hazardous waste opportunities, collections.
And I would add that this is also a county-sponsored function, the hazardous waste. The collections are, I think, 4 times a year. Also, Mike McGuire, who's the director of the hazardous waste programs for the county, has won 4 awards this year. 3 of them were from the state, and I happen to know that because I actually went to the State House when he and representing the county received these awards, mostly all for hazardous waste collections. And the last one was an award given to him by Cavanta, CMAS, because of the programs that he started in collecting mercury, which is something that not very many towns had done before. And they put that together on a Cape-wide basis as well. So there's a lot of work being done, good work in hazardous waste collection.
Save our water.
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I
Yeah.
could just piggyback on that, I think, the comment that Selectman Jones made is critically important because it's really imperative that hazardous waste be disposed of properly. And that's the reason that these special programs are in place. so that individuals and households are not tempted to improperly dispose of hazardous materials. There's a proper way to do it. Municipalities, including Falmouth, fundamentally here, provide for that 4 times per year, and there are local locations at which that can be done, and those are announced throughout the county each year. So we do want to underscore that, and it is very important. And if anyone does have any questions, feel free to call us at Town Hall, the Board of Health, or any of us. We can give you further guidance on that. So that's a great reminder.
Can I further piggyback on that? Actually, our town solid waste town dump recycles fluorescent light bulbs and CFLs, and a lot of people don't realize it, but they actually have mercury gas in them. And you don't want to just throw them in your rubbish. You want to take them there. And then the lithium batteries that come with all kinds of devices that we have, that's not something that should go in the trash. There is a place that you can take them anytime the town dump is open. It doesn't cost you a thing. You don't have to have a dump sticker. And they'll take those materials, and it's taking it out of our biosystem. Yes, animals ingest it one way or another if it goes out into landfills, but guess what? Humans ingest it as well, and it's a way of actually keeping the control of these toxic materials somewhat under control. So I would encourage people to take advantage of the town dump. You can recycle a lot of these things. You don't have to wait for that quarterly opportunity that comes around as well.
Great point.
And it's also time to get a new dump sticker, I might add. January 1st. Okay, clinics and nurses. So now we move to police. Chief? Any questions on the police department budget? Any comments you want to make, Chief, on your budget? I noticed that there is more money being appropriated, but also your new shifts will be, are they in place yet, the change? They'll be happening shortly?
All the shifts will be changing. Yeah, I would just like to say thanks for the extra money there as far as for the domestic violence advocate piece. As you're aware, we didn't receive the grant this year. We will continue applying for the grants, but the domestic violence advocate is a huge portion of the police department and the community. She deals with 30 to 50 cases a month, and also a little bit extra money for the summer patrol, as they started to do the summer patrols again this year. When I started 36 years ago, the town used to hire 40 summer officers. We were down to hiring 2. So I want to try to increase that. So I appreciate those extra funds, and we'll put it to good use to keep the community safe.
Great. Any questions for the chief? No.
Thank you.
Okay, fire rescue. You didn't quite get everything you asked for, Chief.
Did pretty well.
So anything that will make some significant changes for you, or important changes in the department with this budget, do you think?
Most of the changes are basically the salary and wages sections and the contractual requirements that we have to make. The operating budget part of it was a few items in EMS supplies, which are constantly going up. EMS training is a big thing, keeping our paramedics trained. That's really there were a few other things we asked for. We understand the financial constraints.
Could you go into a little more detail about the EMS training? I noticed that the request was a 50% increase. We were not able to, or it has not been recommended quite that amount. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what the reasoning for the request was and what the ramifications of not quite getting what we were requesting would be.
Certainly. That was based, I was trying to get three more physicians. So that part of that was to fund the cost of funding the paramedic training for that. And it's cost about $2,750 for the training each year for a paramedic. So that was part of that, if those 3 positions were approved. We have 2 unfunded positions from 2007 that we haven't gotten funded. They've been approved, part of an 8-person plan, but we've just been unsuccessful each year to get those 2, plus 1 other position. So we were trying to get 3 new firefighters this year, which we were not successful. So part of that funding is for that.
Okay.
But part of it's also for the National Core Competency Program has changed drastically. We used to be certified by the state, now we're being certified by the National Registry Program.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thanks, Chief. Marine and Environmental Services. This is not a brand-new, but a fairly new reorganization between the Marine Services, including the Harbor Master, and Marine Environmental. Not a whole lot of changes. So, Greg, maybe you can tell us, is it working well, the combination of the two departments, would you say?
What's he doing?
Yeah, we've been very happy with the merger so far. It's very seamless because we worked so closely with the DNR prior to the merger. I think it's been a very big success so far. As far as the budget, there are very few changes except for the one that Jennifer had mentioned, was the funding of the last year, the 3-year demonstration manager for the Little Pond project. That's in the temporary seasonal salary. Other than that, they're basically a level funded budget.
Questions?
And again, that one is still up in the air as to whether that's going to be continued beyond that year, or whether we'll be taking that reduction in next year's budget.
We will be looking for your policy guidance next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. The education budget. So it's a 1-number budget. Any comments or questions?
I'll ask the question.
Okay.
Dr. Gifford, this is the requested amount. How close is it to what you want?
Can you ask that question again?
We're seeing a number in front of us of $44 million as the requested amount from the school department.
And the approved amount.
And the recommendation from the executive is the same amount. Certainly, we've heard from many people over the fall about giving the school department more money. In some ways, I'm saying here as the executive, this is the amount that was requested, this is what we're being approved. I would hope that the public would say, thank you for giving what's been asked, as opposed to coming back later in a month saying, why didn't you give them more? I'm leery of ever giving more money than is being asked by a department.
As Jennifer mentioned before, we've continued working with her and her department pretty much every week. It's very difficult for the school department because, as you know, our figures are not even in yet. So what we are is optimistically hopeful that we are able to, through lots of discussion and hard work, are going to be able to meet our needs. We have a new strategic plan that we're working with that's helping us allocate and, if not reallocate, some of our funding. So with some of the, and I know Sam mentioned about CVTE, et cetera, so still looking at some of those numbers that need to still come in. If that is the case, we feel very optimistic that we can meet the needs that we have presently.
Because I think certainly as one member of the board, I can't speak for the rest of my board, I think this is a board that has heard from the community and is very eager and willing to support the school department as best we can, and are thrilled that we are able to recommend the same amount that has been requested.
And what we will do, obviously, is keep the public up to date as we receive more and more information and the work that we do. So.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Can I follow? Before you go, Bonnie, in reviewing the numbers that I saw from December, it looked like the amount of revenue that's allocated to the school is about $40,000 less than what you projected would be required to keep the level services that we have going in this fiscal year into the next fiscal year. So that's a $40,000 deficit right up front. That's like a salary practically, maybe a fraction of one. So you're making that statement, but you obviously then are expecting some improvements in efficiencies?
Well,
You
again, I
didn't
think.
get, you really didn't get what you need in terms of your projections.
I think it goes back, yeah, because we have the Chapter 70 number not known. I just want to address this, and then I'll
Yeah.
let Bonnie. I've been in constant contact with Patrick Murphy. When the Board of Selectmen set their budget policy, and I've been talking to individual people all along, it was 2.29%. That was the number, and we weren't going to assist, we weren't going to ask for any type of the 2.9% for the health insurance, and that's how the discussion starts. Now, Patrick and I have been talking every week, and, there's, that 40,000, and, there might be 100,000 for electricity. We're waiting for that bid to come in. But there was never a formal request for more. I'm the one who put in the requested amount, because that's what the Board of Selectmen's budget policy is. Now, last year, I know at one point it might have been another 100 or 200 you were looking at, but then you're looking at CVTE funds. So we're looking at flexibility in the budget, but I just want to be clear, when I put a requested amount, that didn't come from the school department. That's something that I put on the spreadsheet, because that was what the Board of Selectmen's budget policy was, and I've been in conversations of that's what we started with in the school department. Now, we also talked about if Upper Cape Regional Technical School, that's another, we're waiting for that assessment to come in. Last year, if you remember, we were 1.5 million behind what they stated they needed. But this is more of we're working together to try to meet the needs. I just didn't want you to be under the assumption that, that number is, they gave us that number. That's just something I'm working with them on. But there was never a formal request to say, oh, well, we need this amount more. It's just been a fluid discussion and flexibility in the budget. I just wanted to be clear on that.
And if we wanted to increase it, this is the time that we would do so.
Or
decrease it.
Or
adjust it.
between now and the middle of the month.
Now and January 12th.
Right.
And just to make clear, to piggyback what Jennifer said, our school committee has not approved any number yet because of that fluidity and waiting for more specific numbers to come in.
I just might,
Heather?
well, I just might add, as a matter of practice, that the school department, the finance department, the town manager's office, and the finance committee really works this through as the school department developed its own budget. I don't believe they've even submitted a formal budget as of yet. So that process unfortunately develops after this process, and Jennifer spent an awful lot of time talking about the adaptability and flexibility within the current appropriations within the budget that was presented by the town manager.
And of course, this number can change up until May.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
As needs arise. Okay, thank you.
And and thank you, Heather, for, and aside from this process, it's the budget subcommittee from the finance committee and the budget subcommittee from the school department. They meet frequently, and they're always going over numbers. And this is something that's looked at the finance committee and actually changed last year with the finance committee approval. But as everybody stated, it's still in a level of flexibility and fluidity at this point. But that is an important process, and they work really closely as the numbers get more defined as we move on.
Okay, thank you for that, because I think we know from previous years that it takes a much longer time frame for the school to get the information they need from the state and the state funding and all of those other funding sources, and it doesn't necessarily follow our timelines at all, and we're very aware of that, so.
I just want to comment on the entire feeling I'm getting from the finance committee and the school department and the finance director is a huge change from what it felt like last year about it being between the town and the school as opposed to a community working together to come up with numbers that work for the entire group. And I really appreciate that energy being such a positive community cooperation.
Thank you. Again, it's been great working with the new finance director and Bonnie with the school. We've worked very closely this year looking at a lot of different revenue sources, different ideas that we've passed back and forth. One of them was school choice. So there's been a lot of work, between our departments, and I think, we're really positive going into the budget year.
Good.
Okay, facilities maintenance. I see Chardell is here. Any questions on facilities maintenance? That's
big job. Administration, engineering, DPW administration rather, and engineering. Any questions? Highway? I think everybody's pretty much done what they have to do, and that is stay within the small percentages that are available, and that's just how it is. It's living within that, but 2.5%, not easy. Okay, snow and ice. I saw there was a bit of an increase. I realize it's just a number. It could actually be $1 million, I guess, before the winter's over, but hopefully it won't be. So you upped the old number of 150,000.
Yeah, let me address that.
Sure.
That was a request from our Department of Revenue representative because it's funded so low we're funding it every year. So they wanted to see us, try to, bring that up a little bit. So I did put a little bit more money in that. It wasn't a request actually from DPW. It was something that the DOR requested that we do. So I wanted to put something towards it.
Okay, that's okay. Because we know at the end of the year, it's, depending upon how much snow and ice we have and what the expenses are, it's going to almost to town meeting and turnbacks and looking for every which way to cover the real costs, whatever they may be, and we never know. Okay, any questions on snow and ice? Street lighting. Well, that's a considerable decrease. That's looking better every year, huh?
Made a major change.
New street lights.
New street lights, right. Okay.
Thank you for the board's approval of that. That's
Yes.
allowed us to
See, that's showing some good
enjoy
results.
some annual savings.
And vehicle fuel, well. So now we have a huge problem globally because of the reduction in the prices of gasoline. Economies are slowing down, and who knows what will happen, but for the consumer, it's still a good thing, I guess.
It's a good thing right now. We know that it'll probably go up again at some point. We are part of a regional bid on the fuel, so there's a little bit of a savings, but we still want to be cautious.
Okay. Waste management facility?
I did have one question on that.
Sure.
I'm not sure what exactly, I couldn't find exactly which page it should be under. This is having to do with the deputy, the director for the waste management that was approved 2 years ago, and we did it under contractual services this year. Should that be appearing anywhere in our budget?
That is included in DPW administration.
It is.
Deputy Public Works Director, correct.
That's an unfilled, right now it's an unfilled position, right?
That's an unfilled position. We anticipate advertising once again in the near future.
Okay, that's the vacant, okay, great, thank you.
Okay, solid waste? Any questions?
Nice to see the numbers go down.
Yeah. So our contract, we just started our first contract year with the town of Bourne.
Correct.
So
Solid
we're
waste now
not
goes to
using the.
Bourne landfill.
So everything now goes to so there's a slight decrease, well, there is about $100,000 decrease
Correct.
in what was appropriated, or what was for 2015 rather.
Right.
Now, the line item still refers to as the CMAS contract. Is that just that we have not switched that line item to?
Correct.
to
Yes.
Bourne? Okay.
That's a carryover.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Question?
I think it's probably the amount of cost we've avoided by making that change that's significant. This modest decrease
Right.
is really
Well,
minor
you're
compared
right.
to what we avoided by doing that change in how
Excellent point.
Yeah.
our waste is handled.
The numbers would be considerably higher had the board not embraced that option.
That's true.
And that
That's
is
right.
being viewed by most other communities on the Cape as we speak.
Okay, wastewater? Any comments on wastewater? Any questions, rather, for Jerry? He's here, or he was here. There he is.
Again, similar to what I asked the fire captain, fire chief. The request was significantly higher. We were not actually recommending that request. Is there something that we're missing by not going as high as had been requested? Again, maybe the request is your number on, I don't think it's on the, that's not 2.29%. So.
Yeah, I can answer the question then if Jerry wants to, but the recommendation, you know, in the budget book, the recommendations are the town manager's recommendation.
Right.
The request from the department was 2 additional full-time positions that aren't recommended at this time for the expansion of the wastewater treatment facility. And, you know, through discussions, we felt that could wait. I don't know if Julian wants to expand on that, but it just wasn't recommended for FY16 at this time.
But likely, either 17 or 18, we're going to really have to do that as
Right,
we're
exactly.
expanding the program.
Right.
Correct.
Great.
Yeah.
That's good to be prepared for that.
We're trying to time it appropriately
Right.
and what we bring to the board.
Thank you.
Okay, water utilities? So, will there be any changes to the budget because of the, well, the water treatment facility won't be constructed by the end of the year, obviously.
Correct.
So nothing will be
It's a work in
effective this year.
progress, Yes.
Okay, renewable energy? And parks. Rocky's here. Anybody have questions on parks?
Did I miss
Becky?
the water utilities before?
Well, I said it, but did you have a question? I went over, I didn't.
That's fine.
Did you want to have it, go back to that?
No.
No? Trees and parks? Not too much new, Rocky, hmm? No more trees growing? Okay. Any questions? Council on Aging. Veteran Services stays pretty much the same. The Disability Commission, Human Services Committee, Public Library.
I did have a question relating to the additional hours. Maybe we could just find out.
Right,
what
that
the-
was in the, some additional hours, I think, were in the budget for this year.
Any idea of what those hours might end up being that we could look forward to?
The library will definitely be adding a couple of hours at the North Falmouth branch and 4 hours at the East Falmouth branch, and we'll hopefully be looking at additional hours at the library, at the main library. We haven't really figured that out yet.
Oh, that's
It's wonderful.
Thank you very much.
That's very good news,
It is good news.
especially the branches. I'm sure people will like that. Yeah. Okay, recreation. Helen is here.
I would make a comment on the recreation. I'm looking for the notes that I wrote on that. Where is Helen?
Helen's here.
You want to come up and answer your favorite thing to do, Helen?
Nice picture in the paper.
A very thorough report, very thorough. And I learned about a few more activities in the summertime for children that I was not aware of. But I'll start with my very first one is dues and membership. And can you explain that a little bit?
Those are for my staff's professional membership in Massachusetts Association of Physical Education Recreation.
Okay.
There's 2 associations that we belong to.
Okay, and then in the summer camp, the youth summer camp,
Yes.
which is, okay, you see that on the amount that goes from 28? Can
Well,
you
that
ex-
was the previous year. That was
Okay,
214.
and as I bring it over to the 31,
Yep.
Can you explain that one to me?
Why the increase last year?
No, the summer camp.
For the
Oh, what
increase
is-
from last
We're
year?
lower funding
Yes,
from last year.
yes, yes, the increase from 28 to 31.
Well, that was last year's. That was just for expenses for our field trips.
Oh,
Plus-
okay.
Plus transportation, basically.
The program director is at a total amount of 51,000, and that's in line, I mean, as I was looking at that, however you do the percentages of the salaries,
Yep.
and that fits
Yes.
right in line.
Yes,
And then you also have an assistant director,
correct.
and that, okay. And I think the last one was, I didn't realize we had a sailing program.
Yes, we do.
And how long?
It's a summer program that lasts 7 weeks in the summertime.
Okay. And on the gross overtime, is that an extra?
We don't have much. We have 2,500. I'm asking for an additional 1,000 to cover some expenses.
Okay. All right.
The detail I couldn't find out, and I maybe was reading things too quickly, is what the contractual services are for the recreation department?
The increase, those are for all our contracts, for maintenance companies that come in and service the department.
Okay.
Heating system, elevator.
And that's
comes out of our
fairly
budget,
significant
my
increase
budget.
this year?
The increases are just to cover increased costs for contractual services.
The one thing I will, when I was at the department meeting, enjoying how much more comfortable your office in that
Yes,
meeting
it's
room
very,
is.
it's
It does
nice.
seem like the heating system is working in a way that's.
We're very
much more-
happy.
Okay. And that's part of the ESCO project also, I think that's.
And I think there'll be a reduction in expense of heating the building to County Community Center with the new system.
Oh, that's right, you have a whole new heating system
Yes.
now from the ESCO program. Great. Becky?
How many people are using the facilities on say, in a day or within a week?
On the average,
Yes.
I'd have to sit down and figure that out. People come and go all day long. There's lots of classes that are held there through the night school. It's a very busy place. Evening, every meeting room is booked with meetings. That'd be a good thing to come up with, actually, to sit down and figure that out.
How many people? And basically, it's all residents, or we
Yes.
extend to other towns?
No, the facility is basically used for Falmouth residents only.
Thanks, Helen.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you, Helen. The Beach Committee. Anybody have any questions on the Beach Committee?
Again, it's a very minor thing, it's just the increase in the other supplies. I just got curious as to what the other supplies, going from 4,700 to 7,900. I could not find that in the detail, I'm sure it's in there, but.
Other supplies.
Spruceman?
I have a question on the very last page. Extended the season. Maybe if we could speak it down.
Where's this?
The very last page of the beach. I don't have any.
Oh,
I now found the increase in
Early
the other
sticker
supplies are
sales,
mutt
yeah.
mitts.
Oh, mutt mitts.
I already
That's
answered
a
that.
question,
Good
Mud
catch.
Mitts.
Yep,
Same
I got
as
that.
last year.
Well, if you go around all the beaches, you'll see little green
Oh, don't see it.
containers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And the price is going up all the time.
on mutt
And,
mitts?
Trying to refill we have volunteers that fill them, but trying to get the material itself, it's been going up, and I've actually had to pay, sometimes I don't have enough, and I have to pay out of my donation account. So this added $3,000 will take care of that for the summer. It's a pretty successful program.
It is. One more question. On the last page of this, the extended season, pre and post, is to, as those days are there, we have to remember that sometimes that's used for weddings.
Definitely
just wanna
weather,
say
weather
that
dependent.
again.
That's why, if you'll notice, last year, we returned some wages and salary money because of weather.
Oh, that's different.
The pre and post season, you just, even during the regular season, everything, our wages and salary are definitely dependent on weather. And the only other piece in there is we're going to try again to do that pre-season sticker sales starting May 1st, which will be an added month where people can get stickers. So that's included in there too.
But is that for fiscal year 2015, are we going to be doing that May 1st?
The casino, is that what you said? Yeah.
This year, we'll be doing the extended May 1st, or?
They haven't done it for the last couple of years.
Okay, but we're hoping in fiscal
They
year.
came on like gangbusters to begin with, and then it kind of faded. So that's in there, in our budget too.
Any other questions? Thanks, Tom. Anything you want to add? No?
No, I'm going to have a couple of articles, but that's not for discussion
That's
here.
not for you. Okay. Okay, bikeways?
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Bikeways? We're meeting with bikeways, I think, this week.
Something's coming up.
Yeah. Retirement. Jennifer, anything you want to mention about retirement? What is the percentage that the town contributes? Is it a fairly predictable percentage increase each year? Or does it?
It's more predictable now that that the retirement board adopted this,
The
the new
new,
valuation and the new increase of 5%. But it does change with the actuarial study that's done every 2 years, depending on how the market's performing and, how many people are in the system, out of the system. It does change all the time, but right now, we're hoping it to stay level, a level increase every year.
any questions on the retirement contribution? Unemployment? How come that was reduced?
It was reduced from the request.
From what was
Level funded it.
requested, yeah.
I level funded it.
Level funded?
The recommendation is to level fund it this time.
Health you've already talked about health insurance. Anything? So this number includes, it includes everybody, the retirees, the school, and the town.
Right.
12 million, it's not that bad, all things considered. No, I mean,
Just
I've
increasing
seen
at a
worse.
large rate. It's increasing at a large percentage.
Very
That's
large
the only
rate,
concern.
exactly. Well, I don't want to get into that discussion. Life insurance, that's pretty standard. The Medicare tax, usually we don't get into these. But employee benefits, are these pretty much across the board benefits? Or are they by group? Do you think?
I think they're batched by group, but
Batched by group.
Do you have any further insight on that, Jennifer?
It's just curious.
Denise can assist us with that.
So most of the request
By
is there
contract.
level funded, and
For the most part, these are town expenses. The one that would be shared is the long-term disability. That's for both the school and the town. The other ones are specific to town employees.
Town employees.
The employee persistence program.
Any questions? And the next one is the town insurance, workers' comp, general liability. That, I know, I read in your, somewhere, emails that the insurance has increased considerably.
Correct.
Could at least, could someone explain the bookkeeping the way it is in our chart as to the way the numbers are working, that it's 0 in 1 year expended? Am I just missing a bookkeeping technique that works for insurance?
No, I will, let me just, this is how we break it down, and we can allocate it to the different line items. I guess it's just the way it was done in the past, and we're using a new budget module, so when we downloaded the information, it came out this way. But we'll make sure that we allocate it to
But the
each line item.
appropriated, I mean, really it's, you know, the 0 appropriation is because it's
We're expending-
it's lump summed in the bottom.
Yeah,
It's
and
not
we,
broken down.
I think when we go to town meeting, we're not voting it separately. See, if we vote it separately, we have to stay within that line item. This gives us a little bit of flexibility.
Okay.
So it's voted as the 965,
Gotcha.
but it's expended in those areas.
And we're suggesting it be voted
Oh,
this
I
year as
see.
1.294.
Exactly,
And then we can expend it how we want to, up to that amount.
right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Long-term excluded debt? Long-term unexcluded debt?
On the long-term, back to the excluded debt, the excluded debt schedule that we have, I think it's fantastic to see what it is that we're actually paying off. What I also love are checklists where things are done. Are there any that are, this is the last time we're going to see this one? And I was trying to figure out exactly where does it say, is that the maturity number as to when it's going to be, we won't have to pay it ever again?
No, I'll walk you through it.
I'm sorry.
This is really a spreadsheet that was developed to, track our excluded and unexcluded debt the way we vote it. The bond amount is, you can have several projects when you go out to bond, so that's the total bond, it's not just that project.
Okay.
When we look something up, the history, we're looking at paperwork and when it was
So
bonded,
maturity date,
we see the total amount. The project number, when it was issued, and the maturity date. So this did mature in 2013. I will take it off. There aren't any numbers I will tell you with the refinance, this was something I've been working on in the past week. I needed to get it finished for the budget because we had just finished the refinancing and I had to redo all the schedules. So that was probably why I didn't delete those line items if there aren't any numbers in it. But it tells you right when it ended. It ended in July 15th of 2013, the first one, the fire department equipment. And this spreadsheet goes on to when it will finally be paid off. So if you look at the maturity date, that will tell you when it's being paid off.
No, actually, I was saying, that I'm thrilled to see these
Oh,
ones
okay.
that are no longer repaying, but we did pay them recently, saying, yeah, we just took care of that one. And we have things that we're checking off, and we can see that there are some that are, I guess the next one we do is 2016, will be the 1.5 million on the bond.
That's correct.
That was the next one coming up to be erased.
Yeah, that brings up another question. I was thinking the other day about, what does our chart look like, say, over the next 10 years for retired debt?
Well, I haven't done the presentation probably in about a year, but that's a presentation I can do. I've actually been working with it recently. I spent a lot of time on that chart when I was looking at the refinancing and looking at how much we wanted to bond and how much we didn't want to bond, and what we're looking at the trust and the 0% as we get more information. It's a presentation I can do. The debt definitely drops off. There might be a few years in there. It is a plan. The plan changes of when you're bonding and when the project starts. So we want some flexibility in there, but there are a couple years in there that we need to kind of look at and see if we can reallocate some money, but we're trying to keep all the projects within that debt drop-off, and, you know, the betterments, we'll be voting the betterments shortly, you know, to offset some of that debt. So, I mean, it looks good, but it's forever changing.
Yeah, it's just, I think, in looking ahead for any major projects, we haven't looked at a major project since we talked about wastewater and water, and we knew what the schedule was for when debt was going to retire and the amount of that debt, but we haven't looked at that lately, so I've kind of forgotten what debt is coming up over the next 10 years and available.
Yeah, really, it's the water and the wastewater, that is a $100 million project. One of the things that we want to be looking at some point in water rates, you know, so the water rates will reduce the debt. That's something that needs to be discussed. Once we discuss that and set the water rates and look at that and how that will decrease the debt, we'll have a better idea of where the debt drop-off is. But right now, I would say, with the chart that I've been working with, you know, incurring new debt, really, because we have the 100 million out there
Right.
until probably after 2021.
2021?
But again, with the water rates, that should reduce, and it might give you
Right.
someone, because you might see one year go down, and then so we want to reallocate into that year. But if you're looking at a new major project, that would be excluded debt. You're looking at probably that out year. Another issue that will come up, and you'll be looking at the April town meeting, is a warrant article for the Lawrence School windows. That will be a ballot vote. That will be excluded. That's over $3 million. Now I'll have to try to fit that into the window. But if you're looking at a new initiative and a larger project, it will be a few years out. That's not on the plan.
So there's no way to get that back into the ESCO project, I guess. Is that too late to do that?
Well, in a future phase, potentially. But, yeah, it was a project that looked significantly different when it was being considered for ESCO than it appears to now.
And just to follow up, right now, the project is proposed as an excluded project on the ballot. The ESCO doesn't necessarily follow that same pattern, so you'd be absorbing that additional debt expense within the operation.
Right. Sam?
Since you brought up those windows, are we going to have somebody actually review those estimates to see whether those were properly compiled? I know that at least one of the reasons it was given for this huge increase in prices because the windows have to be hurricane-proof. And I didn't know whether Eladio had taken a look at that, as to whether that was a legitimate reason for such a huge increase in the estimate. But are we going to try to second-guess that, is my question?
I'm not sure what the protocol is on that. That hadn't been discussed with me at all previously, so if the school department that's carrying the ball on that would like us to attempt to become more involved, I'd be happy to take a look at it. That's the first time I've heard those details.
Yeah, Nick, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Nick Lowell, Vice Chairman of the Finance Committee, I have had some discussions with this, with Patrick Murphy, because it being part of the original ESCO project and having been very involved in that project from the get-go. He is first waiting to find out whether we officially get on the funding list from the MSBA, Mass School Building Authority. They're meeting sometime this month, I don't remember exactly when. Assuming that we do, his plan was then to reach out to the building committee and form a small group to just really take a close look at this number, because it certainly was some sticker shock. Going back, he's done a little bit of investigating, and it looks like the original number of 1.1, 1.2 million was really not a proper estimate. It was more of a walkthrough with an architect. It did not account for the hurricane-resistant glass. It didn't have an allowance for the disposal, and there's a certain amount of asbestos, PCBs, and lead paint involved in some of these windows that have been there for a long time. So, but Patrick's plan, as he explained it to me, was to form a group to really look at it very closely so that if this is going on to the spring town meeting, it would have been thoroughly reviewed.
Now, could you say to me that if there wasn't a change in the ESCO, at the time there was the vote with the Finance Committee, Wouldn't it have been finished by now if it was an ESCO project?
No, my understanding is that if it had been part of the ESCO, they would have investigated it further and found that the costs would have been much higher than what had been planned in the $1.1, $1.2 million number, and it probably would have had been pulled out. It's my understanding. The second thing to remember is that by going through the MSBA, there is a 37.38% reimbursement from the state, so which we wouldn't have been able to get if we'd done it through the ESCO project. So I don't know exactly, but it wouldn't have. It seems unlikely that the project could have been completed in the ESCO because they still would have had to do the hurricane-proof windows, and they still would have had to deal with the disposal issues with the hazardous materials.
I guess my issue is that the schools have always utilized ESCOs because of the efficiency, because it is done on a timely manner. They present to the town, and it's been kind of the personality on the school side. And I say that in accordance with previous superintendents, that ESCO was a valued partner whenever we needed to do roofs or floors or gymnasium floors or windows. ESCO was always the person that Falmouth would use because of their efficiency, because of the materials they used, and because they were quick. So now that this has been identified as a problem that's going into 3-4 years with windows that are leaking, and anytime you would do something with the state, you put it on a long list and you compete. It's the same thing as what happened with the high school. You compete with other school systems, and then you wait. Well, we're talking about leaky windows. It's not as if the gym floor needs to be fixed. It's a point that there was a good partnership on the school side and ESCO when you needed something for the schools and you needed it efficient and it was good work. And that's my position.
If I could answer that, with my take on that is that having been involved in the ESCO project, you may recall that the payback on the windows was estimated to be over 500 years. So there really wasn't an energy savings involved in the ESCO project. The only reason to do it was to go through the efficiencies of using the bid efficiencies and the sole source contracting of the ESCO project. But by going through the ESCO project, we would not have gotten any of the reimbursement from the state for that. Now, the fact that the estimate went up from 1-point-something million to 3-point-something million really, I think, is indicative of the original estimate was not a valid estimate. It was a walkthrough. And so if we'd run into this later on, it probably would have run into a problem. So I think that, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do ESCOs in the schools, but I'm also saying that I still feel that this project was not the right project to do with the ESCOs. And it's unfortunate that the numbers have come up so much.
Heather?
I just want to clarify the process, just so folks are very clear on what that was. The windows were part of an overall plan of about $5 million. It was $4 million and change that was initially proposed, the Board of Selectmen endorsed. And that was based on an initial scoping assessment by Train. And that scoping assessment identified a range of energy conservation measures that could be accomplished within a certain parameter of energy efficiency, and that was about 20% energy efficiency within the entire scope of all the entire project. The projects that were advanced to the full contract, excluding the Lawrence School, went to a full investment grade audit. And once that investment grade audit is complete, our town's consultant verifies that the energy conservation measures and the specifications are appropriate, then Train is required to meet both the quality control and the energy efficiency for the life of the contract. That didn't happen with the windows, but our experience is that the investment grade, the initial scoping audit is a very good barometer of what the ultimate project looks like. So it went through phase 1, initial audit, but it did not go through the investment grade audit process.
Because the project changed, because
It
somebody
wasn't
made a
included.
decision
Right.
not to do it.
The schools made the decision not to
Not
include
to
it in the
include it.
ESCO.
Right.
So it was withdrawn for that reason.
Okay. Well, it's a disappointment to me. I wish those windows had been finished.
I would absolutely love to see those windows replaced, and I hope that it can go forward as quickly as possible. But yeah, the MSBA does seem to work on its own pace, and that's the price to getting close to 40% reimbursement.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, any other comments on the excluded debt? Jennifer, did you want to say anything more on excluded? We'll go to unexcluded?
No, I really don't have any comments. It's, we just updated the spreadsheets with the refinance.
Okay.
Here to answer any questions you may have.
And then yes.
If we go on that last page, is everything finished with Silver Beach, or do we still have, on the very last, in this middle column, I'm looking at Silver Beach.
Is it excluded debt or unexcluded debt?
It's the excluded debt.
Okay. It's on the second page.
Yes.
And the back page?
Is it the new Silver Beach?
Yes.
Okay. No, that won't be done paid off until 2028. That's what you're asking?
Yes.
Or are you talking about the adjustment that was made?
No,
with the excluded debt?
so it's 2028?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So then we'll move to the short-term excluded? Or,
Long-term.
oh, did I miss long-term?
I think you said.
Long-term,
Short-term?
excluded.
No, I said long-term excluded. Now I'm going to short-term excluded. And then to court judgments, which are, it's just a number. Questions about any of that? Any other questions? So we're going to take this, obviously, under advisement. And then any questions we have for Julian or Heather are always available, or Jennifer, if...
Our plan is to vote next Monday on it.
Correct.
And then our final vote will come on Monday, the 12th.
Monday the 12th.
Monday
will be
the
here.
12th, because it has to go to the Finance Committee that week.
Correct.
Right, so we have a week to resolve any issues we might have. Okay, is there anything else to come before the board?
Thank you, department heads.
Absolutely, to thank the department heads for all their work and putting this together, and one of these days, we might find a golden pot at the end of the rainbow, but it's not going to happen very soon. But thank you for your work, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have license renewals.
Oh, we have license renewals,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
Forget that one.
Okay, there are very few. Common victular licenses, Betsy's Diner on Main Street, Village Diner on County Road, North Falmouth, Primetime House at Pizza at East Falmouth Highway, and Primetime House at Pizza on Old Main Road, North Falmouth.
I move approval.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, unanimous. And 2 Class 2 used car dealers, Battles Used Cars and Trucks, Depot Avenue, Falmouth, and Falmouth Auto Works of Worcester Court.
Move approval.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, unanimous. Now, we have one more thing here.
Those are the handouts. You can just hand those down.
Those are the page adjustments. in
Oh,
the,
page
notebooks.
adjustments.
One
They're-
copy for each
They're
of the
scrivener's
selectmen.
errors, they're not.
Okay, everybody gets a copy to put in your budget book.
Each of the 2 handouts.
And one of these, too.
Minor adjustments.
Small adjustments, I probably should have.
Now I have lots of questions.
You should have had questions before.
I was wondering why Sam wasn't in
Okay, town manager's report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just just a reminder for the board, in cooperation with our colleagues at the town of Bourne, there is a modest ribbon-cutting ceremony tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. scheduled at the Bourne landfill. Just formally recognizing ceremonially, the first loads of solid waste coming from the town of Falmouth in collaboration with the town of Bourne. So it formally identifies the beginning of a very significant long-term working relationship with our neighbor, and we're looking forward to that, and welcome any members of the board that can join us. It is at an awkward time, 10 a.m. tomorrow. It was set by our colleagues in Bourne, and we're happy to be there and to cheer on the start of that new program, which, as Selectman Patterson pointed out, although it's not reflected directly in the budget, but had we not had this available, had the board not concurred in this 10-year plus some additional years contract, our costs would be considerably higher than we'd be looking at for FY16, and actually beginning this very month, the second half of FY15. So it's a very good cost-effective, cost-saving move going forward. Even though dollars go up no matter what, they go up at a much lower rate of increase because of the option with the landfill. And we are the only other municipality in the Cape which is able to take advantage of that, because this Board of Selectmen was willing to move expeditiously and take advantage of that fairly narrow window of opportunity with our neighbor. So happy to confirm that, and look forward to this ribbon cutting at 10 o'clock tomorrow, and the potential for exploring expanded partnerships with our neighboring community as well. We welcome that. And, Happy New Year to all, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you.
Sam?
Yes, can I ask a little bit about the Bourne landfill in terms of how they're going to process the waste that we send them? Because I think there's probably some concern in the community about how much of it's going to be recycled, whether there's any benefit other than just burying it. And I get the impression that they actually are looking at some kind of recycling process that will reduce their cost, but of course manage the cost for us as well. Do you know anything that would help us?
Well, the only thing that I can confirm is that the recyclables that we collect curbside, go elsewhere. They're not landfilled, of course, so they're automatically put back into the reusable waste stream. But the actual solid waste that's not collected as part of the recycle bin that goes to Bourne, I do know that they're looking at some potential cutting-edge technologies for some things on food waste and some other areas, but I don't have the details of that, but I'm certain that we could provide some of that further information in a meeting to come. If that would be the desire of the board, I'd be happy to do that.
That might be comforting to some of us anyway, to know that it's not just being buried, that in fact there might be some value that's gained from it. From a sustainability, environmental sustainability standpoint.
Well, maybe if you go to that event tomorrow, you can find out and tell us exactly how all that is, what they do with it.
I can confirm, and I guess it's probably obvious to the board, but that those large volumes, tons of solid waste that the town in the past has transmitted to CMAS has of course been mass burned. And even though, there are environmental negatives to that as well, as most of us are aware. They're a different set of environmental negatives by and large, but you do put some things into the air that are released as a result of the burning, in addition to the landfilling of the remaining ash. So it's a matter of alternative technologies, but I'm happy to explore that further and provide that information to the board. Heather had a few comments too.
Oh, Heather.
Yes, Chairman Flynn asked me to share some information I
yeah.
shared with the board earlier today. If you recall, the first meeting after town meeting, the board invited the petitioner of White Pine Lane in to discuss the next steps for White Pine Lane. And I'm happy to report that the neighborhood has been able to get together and prepare a full taking plan. That plan was submitted today. We went to the town engineer just to make sure that it meets all the standard criteria. The next steps, there's a rather lengthy process that goes along with that culminates with town meeting vote, is to place the articles on the warrant. One to raise and appropriate the funds to take the road, and the second is to take the road as a public way. Along the way, there are multiple hearings that occur. The Board of Selectmen will have to vote its intent to lay out White Pine Lane. You could do that at your next board meeting. We had initially scheduled that for February 2, or anticipated February 2, giving the neighborhood a little bit of time to get their plans in, but they've got that done. So if the board's prepared to, you could do at your very next meeting, you could vote to your intention to lay out White Pine Lane, allowing them, the planning board has up to 45 days to review that under the guidelines of the statute.
And then we would have to have the betterment hearing at some point.
That would be in March.
Yeah, that
Yes.
would be in March.
And so all of the contiguous homeowners have had notice of this and have participated?
This is simply step one, which is that the neighbors have got together and had a plan prepared, which submits the required documentation. There would be, if the board chooses to vote its intention to lay out White Pine Lane, once it's referred to the planning board and you get the referral back, you would then hold a public hearing on both the road taking and the betterment. At that time, you talk about the taking process, as well as any cost sharing the board may be willing to consider.
When you say neighbors, it just means some
Abutters.
So-
No, all the.
All the abutters.
All the
abutters.
All
abutters.
the abutters to White Pine Lane, yes, absolutely.
They have all participated, that was my question, yes?
To this point, I do not know, but the town's role in engaging them comes at the public hearing,
Right.
where you would send a notice to all
But the plan that's
abutters.
been presented has been by
Some neighbors.
people,
Okay.
Not
Yeah.
everybody.
Correct.
Great.
When you say this will be a public way, is the plan then that road goes straight through to the other one that crosses at the top of the hill? Right now, it stops.
Correct.
And then the rest is just dirt, but they're using it. So now, will that become a road that goes from Sandwich Road to, I don't know what the name of that one is, at the top of the hill?
Lake Shore, I believe,
Yeah,
Is
like
it Lake Shore that goes, it runs along that side?
right around the lake.
Is that what you mean by public way?
Well, public way is just the legal definition of the way. A public way could be a gravel way. Right now, it's a private way. But in order to become a public way, our standard is that it needs to meet subdivision standards so that we have 20 years life out of the road. So yes, the road would be paved from Lake Shore to Sandwich Road.
Okay.
And we are taking them out of line, so to speak, because of the town meeting vote.
Right.
Two additional requests this
Yeah.
week.
Oh, 2 more requests this week? You mean people, petitioners who are
Seeking to
already
know
on the
how to
list?
become new.
Oh, new petitioners, yeah. So how many do we have on the list altogether?
Offhand, I don't know if the board will just recall that there's a moratorium on the 100% betterment program because the funds are
not there.
they need to
Right.
replenish.
Well, maybe that would be an agenda item going forward, so that there is some parity in our road process. In other words, maybe we would want to discuss how to maintain that fund, so that we don't have people jumping the line out of the fact that we don't have a means of getting this work done otherwise. In other words, a better process, maybe we want to discuss the process so that there is parity.
The only reason the line got jumped is because of the town meeting vote.
Right, but Heather just mentioned there are two more groups that want to jump the line.
No, they don't want to jump the line. They just put in the petition.
Right.
Oh, I see, okay, thank you, thank you.
See, the thing is, the funding for this has been through the betterments. And so when the funding is gone, then there isn't any more funding to adopt any more roads like that, right?
We simply need the seed capital in order to pay the contractors to build the road, and then we collect that over time. So your road, it's like the old, It's a Wonderful Life. Your road pays for the next road, which pays for the next road, and you just have to have enough funds available for contracting purposes. And within the next several years, we'll see that replenish, and we'll be able to take another road.
So
But it
will
isn't
White-
instantaneous.
Part of the White Pine allocation will go into this fund? Yes?
The
no?
betterment. What
Part
they
of the
pay in the betterment will go into the fund, but there is no money now in the fund to pay for White Pine, but because town meeting voted it, we have to take an article back to the April town meeting to raise and appropriate
Correct.
the money to pay for the road, because there isn't any other funding source.
Town meeting has most recently awarded and taken Elizabeth Jean Drive as a public way, or they're next. And that road has not commenced yet. We've not started work, so we've not expended funds on that road. So that's the next road that will be accomplished. And we've been, fairly successful, kind of slugging along at this. It isn't a fast process, but it does get it done.
Would you recommend a quicker process? Your history is the way it is going, that one is finished, and the funds from that go to the next name on the list. And it slows the list down as you're waiting for each project.
The process is always slow because there's no money.
Because of the money.
If we put $2 million into the seed money, the process would be very quick. It's just we don't have the cash to.
Why aren't you thinking about that?
I'd rather put the money to the schools.
The scope of the issue is the number that we used 15 years ago was $20 million. There are so many gravel private roads in our community and neighborhoods that are ultimately would be desiring of the program, that it's just such a big number, that the process of just addressing it on an ongoing basis seems to be effective. It does take a long time, but they do get done.
Okay, so Doug, your money isn't going to take care of that list.
So we're after the
Okay.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, unanimous.